Beyond the Deep Woods, chapter 12. So let's talk about chapter 11. That's when he he had gotten away from the termagants, and then he was wandering around, and then he those wolves almost got him, but that other guy, what was his name? His name was Garble. No, yeah, his name is Garble. And he got the dogs to come back, and then he showed him how he did that stick in the heart about which way he should go. And remember when Twig did it, the stick stood up straight, and then he just left him when that other animal came back, and Gab Troll. No. Karg. Oh. It says Karg. That's the name of that animal right there. Yeah, he finds his own food. Okay, so then he just wanders away and he doesn't know what to do. Okay. The Sky Pirates. Far above Twig's head, the clouds thinned. They swirled and squirmed around the moon like a bucket full of maggots. Twig stared upward, spellbound, horrified. So much skybound activity while down on the forest floor, it was also still, not a leaf stirred. The heavy air felt charged. All at once, a flash of blue-white light splashed across the far reaches of the sky. Twig counted. When he got to 11, a booming roll of thunder rumbled. Again the sky lit up, brighter than before. Again the thunder sounded. This time Twig only counted to 8. The storm was getting closer. He began to run, slipping, stumbling, sometimes falling. He hurried across the treacherous forest floor, now bright as day, now black as pitch. Wind had got up, dry, electric. It tousled his hair and set the fleece of his Hamel hornskin waistcoat bristling. With his eyes full of the pinky after dazzle of each lightning bolt, the darkness that followed was all the darker. Twig staggered on blindly. The wind gusted at his back. There was a crackle in the sky directly above his head, and a jagged fork of absolute brilliance torn the sky apart. The thunder struck at once with a crash. The air trembled. The earth shook. Twig fell to the ground and wrapped his arms around his head. "It's falling!" he stammered. "The sky is falling!" A second eye-blinding, ear-splitting mix of thunder and lightning battered the forest. Then a third and a fourth. Yet, all the time, that space between the two was growing. Twig climbed shakily to his feet. The forest, one moment brightly lit like a tribe of dancing skeletons, the next plunged into darkness, was still around him, the sky still above. He climbed one of the trees, a tall and ancient luffwood, to watch the storm receding. Up and up it went. The swirling wind plucked at his hands and feet. At the top, he rested in a swaying fork, panting for breath. The air smelled of rain, but no rain fell. The lightning stabbed the sky, glowed. The thunder rumbled. Abruptly, the wind dropped. Twig wiped his eyes and, with his fingers, combed away the last remaining beads and bows. He watched them bounce and flutter out of sight below him. He looked up, and there, just for a second, silhouetted against the lightning sky, Twig's heart missed a beat. "A sky ship," he whispered. The lightning faded, the ship disappeared. Another flash, and the sky lit up again. "But now it's facing the other way," Twig said. More lightning, and the sky grew brighter still. "It's spinning," he gasped. "It's caught in a whirlwind." Round and round the sky ship went, faster and faster, so fast that even Twig felt dizzy. The mainsail flapped wildly. The rigging lashed the air. Powerless, out of control, the sky ship was being dragged towards the swirling vortex at the center of the storm. Suddenly, a single solitary finger of lightning zigzagged down out of a cloud. It hurtled towards the spinning sky ship. It struck! The ship rolled to one side. Something small and round, twinkled like a star, fell away from the side and tumbled down towards the forest below. The sky ship spiraled down after it. Twig gasped. The sky ship was dropping out of the sky like a stone. It went dark again. Twig chewed his hair, his scarf, his nails. It remained dark. One more flash, Twig pleaded, just so I can see what's... The flash came, illuminating a long stretch across the distant horizon. In the dim light, Twig saw 3 bat-like creatures hovering above the falling ship, and as he watched, 2, 3 more joined them, each one leaping from the decks and fluttering away on the ebbing wind. The sky pirates were abandoning ship. An 8th figure leaped to safety as seconds before the sky ship crashed down into the forest canopy. So here it is before it started falling. Sky ship. Cool. Twig flinched. Had the whole crew managed to escape in time? Had the sky ship been smashed to bits? Had the flying figures he'd seen landed safely? He fairly flew back down the tree and raced off through the woods as fast as his legs would carry him. The moon was shining bright and clear, and the night animals were all in full voice. The trees, shot with their own shadows, looked as if they'd been draped in long nets. Apart from the occasional fallen branch and whiff of smoldering greenwood, there was no sign that the storm had passed that way. Twig ran till he could run no more. He stood doubled over, a stitch in his side, and gulped for breath. Moonbirds twittered loudly from their perches above his head. Then Twig heard another noise, a hissing, a spitting. He walked forwards. It seemed to be coming from a comb bush just up ahead. He pushed the branches aside and was immediately struck by a blast of intense heat. Lying half buried in the ground was a rock. It was enormous and round and glowed white hot. The grass around it had shriveled. The overhang bush was charred. Twig squinted at the rock, sheltered his eyes from the heat, and dazzled. Could this be the star he'd seen falling from the sky ship? He looked around. The ship and its crew couldn't be far away. The moonbirds were squawking irritably over something or other. Twig clapped his hands and they flew off. Out of the silence that followed, Twig heard a low murmur of voices. He crept forward. The voices grew louder. He caught sight of a tall, heavy-set, red-faced man with a thick, knotted beard and ducked down behind a fallen branch. It was a sky pirate. "We'd best find the others," he was saying, his voice deep and chewy. He chuckled. The look on Slivo's face when he jumped, white as codfish he was, and green at the gills. "He was up to something," a reedy voice replied matter-of-factly. "Up to no good." Twig stretched up to see who was speaking. "You're not wrong there, Spiker," said the bearded pirate gruffly. "He's not been happy since the business with the ironwood. That 'lectric storm was a blessing in disguise, or my name's not Tim Barkwater." He paused. "I just hope the captain's all right." "Sky willin'," came the reply. Twig stretched up again, but could still see only the one pirate. He stepped up into the branch for a better look, and crack! The wood gave way under his foot. So there's that one pirate with the red beard. "What was that?" bellowed Tim Barkwater. He spun around and scoured the silvery shadows. "Probably just an animal," the second sky pirate said. "I'm not so sure," Tim Barkwater said slowly. Twig cowered down. The whispering sound of tiptoed footsteps approached. Twig looked up. He found himself staring into the delicate yet broad face of someone little older than himself. An oak elf, by the look of him. It must be Spiker. The oak elf stared at Twig, a puzzled frown playing over his features. Finally, "Do I know you?" he said. "You find anything?" Tim Barkwater called. Spiker continued to stare. His tufted ears twitched. "Yes," he said quietly. "What's that?" "I said yes," he shouted back and seized Twig by the shoulder. The Hamelhorn skin fleece turned at once to needles and stabbed the oak elf's hand. He yelped and pulled away and sucked his fingers tenderly, all the while staring suspiciously at Twig. "Follow me," he instructed. Here's what he looks like. "What have we here, then?" said Tim Barkwater, as Spiker and Twig emerged before him. "Lanky little so-and-so, ain't he?" said, and squeezed Twig's upper arm with a bulgy finger and thumb. "Who are you, lad?" "Twig, sir," said Twig. "Extra hand on board, eh?" he said, and winked at Spiker. Twig felt a thrill of excitement shudder through his body. "If there's still an on board left," the oak elf commented. "Of course there is," said Tim Barkwater. He laughed throatily. "Just a matter of finding out where it's got to." Twig cleared his throat. "I think it's over there," he said, pointing to his right. Tim Barkwater turned and stooped and pressed his large red hairy face into Twig's. "And how would you know that?" I saw it crash," he said uncertainly. "You saw it?" he bellowed. "I was up a tree watching the storm. I saw the sky ship get trapped in the whirlwind." "You saw it?" Tim Barkwater repeated, more softly now. He clapped his hands together. "Then you'd better lead us there, Twig, me old mucker." It was a mixture of luck and guesswork that got him there, but get him there he did. They hadn't gone more than 100 steps before Tim Barkwater spied the hull ahead of them, glinting in the moonlight high up in the branches. "There she is," he muttered, "the storm chaser herself. Well done, lad," he said to Twig, and slapped him heartily on the shoulder. "Shh," hissed Spiker. "We're not the first ones back." Tim cocked his head to one side. "It's that rogue of a quartermaster, Slivo Spleeth," he muttered. Spiker raised a finger to his lips, and the three of them stood stock still, straining to hear the murmuring conversation. "It would seem, my dear mugbutt, that our captain has overreached himself," Slivo was saying. His voice was nasal and precise, with every D and T being spat out like something distasteful. "Overreached himself," came a low, gruff echo. Tim Barkwater shifted about restlessly. His face grew thunderously dark. He craned his neck. "The stone pilot's with them, too," he whispered. Twig stole a glance through a gap in the leaves. There were 3 pirates there. Mugbutt was a flathead goblin with his broad flat skull and white ears. He was typical of his kind, yet fiercer by far than the flathead who had helped Twig out of the swamp. Behind him stood a squat creature dressed in a heavy overcoat and heavier boots. His head was hidden beneath a large pointed hood, which extended down over his chest. 2 round glass panels allowed him to see out. He did not speak. The 3rd pirate was Slivo Spleeth himself, a tall yet stooped figure, all angles and points. His nose was long, his chin sharp, and beneath his steely-rimmed spectacles, his shifty eyes were constantly on the move. Here's a picture. Okay. "I mean, far be it from me to say I told you so," he continued, "but, well, if we had left the ironwood as I suggested, the price of the stuff is plummeting anyway at the moment." There was a pause and a sigh. "If we had left, we wouldn't have been anywhere near the storm." "Near the storm," growled Mugbutt. "Still, who am I to argue with fate? If the command of the ship was destined to fall upon my shoulders, I must accept my responsibility with—" he searched for the right word. Mugbutt filled in the silence. Responsibility with. Oh, do stop interrupting me, Slivo snapped. You are brave in battle, Mugbutt. Don't get me wrong, a credit to your tribe, but you lack any sense of occasion. Occasion, Mugbutt repeated. Slivo grunted impatiently. Come, he said, let's break the glad tidings to the others. Tem could remain still no longer. Treacherous dog, he growled as he burst through the undergrowth and into the clearing. The stone pilot, Mugbutt, and Slivo Spieth all spun around. My dear Tem, said Slivo, his disappointment turning instantly into a tight-lipped smile. And Spiker, you two made it too. Twig held back, watching, listening. He ought to be chained up, said Tem, pointing at the flathead goblin. Captain's orders. Slivo lowered his head coyly and fiddled with one of the knots in his mustache. The thing is, he whimpered, looking up over his glasses, as I was just saying to Mugbutt here, our illustrious captain, Quintinius Virginix, is, he looked around theatrically, not here, he smirked, and Mugbutt does so enjoy his freedom. Tem grunted. For the time being, at least, there was nothing he could do. What state is the ship in? He asked. Slivo looked up. How's it going, Stoop? He called. Okay, came a voice, which squeaked as it spoke. Superficial damage, mainly. The rudder's taken a hammering, but nothing I can't fix. Will she soon be skyworthy? Said Slivo impatiently, his head poked out from the overhead foliage. A hard bullet head it was, with a close-fitting metal frame over the skull, which held a bolted jaw in place. She won't be skyworthy till we get the flight rock back in place. So there's the guy talking. It's like he's half robot or something. Skyrock. Slivo grimaced and stamped his feet sulkily. Can't you improvise? Luffwood, Blood Oak? They rise. Just burn more. Stoop Boltjaw tutted and shook his head. Can't do it, he said. You could never contain a fire the size it would have to be to achieve the required lift. And besides, there must be something you can do, Slivo screamed. I still don't understand why the blasted rock fell in the first place. 'Cause it was struck by lightning, said Stoop Boltjaw. I know that, you idiot, snapped Slivo, but cold rock rises, hot rock sinks, Stoop continued patiently. Scientific fact, and I'll tell you another scientific fact. What heats up cools down. If you lot don't find that flight rock before much longer, it'll have floated off forever. And now, if you'll excuse me, I've got the cradle moorings to repair, just in case you should find it. His head disappeared back behind the leafy branches. Slivo bit into his lips. The blood drained from his face. You heard him, he snarled. Find the flight rock! Spiker and Mugbutt turned and hurried off. The stone pilot plodded after them. Tem Barkwater held his ground. Well, Slivo demanded, I might be able to tell you where the rock is, on one condition. When it's back in place, we wait for the captain. Oh, but of course, said Slivo. I give you my word. He reached out and shook Tem by the hand. From his place in the undergrowth, Twig saw the quartermaster's other arm swing around behind his back. The hand was missing 2 fingers, and the raw scars looked recent. The 2 remaining fingers were stiffly crossed. Tem nodded. I aim to ensure that you keep your word, he said. He turned away. Twig, he called out. Are you there, lad? Come out where I can see you. Twig stood up and stepped forwards. A spy, hissed Slivo. A witness, said Tem. To what you promised. He turned to Twig. Do you know where the flight rock landed? He asked. Twig hesitated. He glanced up at Slivo Spleeth. It's all right, Tem assured him. Twig nodded. I know all right, he admitted. I saw it. Like a shooting star it looked. Well, a dropping star, a falling star. Get on with it, said Slivo sharply. Twig blushed. He was talking so much, but he couldn't help it. The whiff of adventure about the rough and rugged sky pirates quickened his heart and loosened his tongue. He turned away from Slivo's intense gaze and started walking. It's this way, he said. Hey, you lot, Slivo Spleeth called out to Spiker, Mugbutt, and the stone pilot. Follow us. Twig led the ragtag rabble of pirates back through the forest. The way looked familiar in the swaying lamplight. He first heard and then saw the humming comb bush. He marched up to it and parted the branches. The stone was still there, embedded in the ground. It glowed a deep, buttery yellow. It was white before, said Twig. It's cooling down, said Tim. The trick will be to get it back to the skyship while it's light enough to carry, but heavy enough not to fly away. Slivo turned to the stone pilot. You are responsible for transporting it. So there it is. Just looks like a big rock. And there is that guy carrying it. Stone pilot. Yeah. From deep within the stone pilot's pointed hood came a grunt of acknowledgement. He lumbered forward, crouched down, and embraced the rock in his broad arms. The sleeves and front of his fireproof coat hissed. Twig sniffed. The air smelt of scorched mud. The stone pilot heaved and strained, and the glass panels of the front of his hood misted over. But the flight rock did not budge. Empty your water flasks onto it, said Tim. Yes, Slivo said, remembering his new responsibilities. Empty your water flasks onto it. He and the others began pouring water onto the glowing stone. Where it landed, the water hissed and turned the rock a shade of orange. More, Slivo commanded. The sky pirates trotted off, returning soon after with their flasks refilled. Little by little, the rock turned a rich, deep red. It began to wobble in its earthly setting. The stone pilot tried again. This time, the rock came out of the ground with a soft squap. Staggering under the weight and wheezing, the stone pilot trudged back to the clearing. The others tramped after him. Because of the intense heat radiating from the rock, there was nothing they could do to help, nothing but hope and pray. The hull of the skyship came into view. We've got it, Stoop, Tim called ahead. We've got the flight rock. I'll be ready directly, Stoop Boltjaw shouted back. Twig again noticed the squeaking sound as he spoke. I'm just making sure the grappling hooks and anchor are secure, he said. Wouldn't want her leaving without us. The stone pilot grumbled. The cooling rock was threatening to slip out of his grasp at any moment. Have you rigged up the cradle? Slivo called up. What do you take me for? Came the irritated reply. Of course I have. I used some of the ironwood. It's less buoyant than luffwood or blood oak, but more fire resistant, in case the rock's still too hot. The stone pilot grunted urgently. It's rising, Spiker yelled. Stoop Boltjaw's head appeared out of the tree. Can you climb with it? He asked. The stone pilot shook his head and groaned. It was all he could do to keep the increasingly buoyant rock in his grasp. In that case, Stoop called down, we'll go for plan B, but it'll need pinpoint accuracy if it's going to work. The stone pilot will have to get the rock directly beneath the cradle before releasing it. So, left a couple of paces. The stone pilot shuffled awkwardly to the left. Stop. Forwards a tad. Stop. Back a bit. Left. Back a bit more. Stoop paused. That should do it, he whispered. When I say now, let the rock go, but be careful not to nudge it when you do. Twig peered up into the tree. He saw Stoop Boltjaw open the door of a cage-like contraption attached to the center of the hull. He held it open with his foot and raised a long harpoon. Ready. Now, he called. The stone pilot gently released his load. For a moment, the rock hovered in the air. It rotated. Then it began to rise, slowly at first, but soon gathering speed. Twig saw Stoop Boltjaw bracing himself against the branch. The rock came closer. It was going to miss the cradle. Stoop leaned forwards and gently prodded the rock with his harpoon. It shifted slightly to the left and continued to rise. Come on, Slivo urged the flying rock. He turned to Mugbutt. "If he does it, I want everyone on board at once," he hissed. Twig listened closely. "And if Tim Barkwater objects," he went on, "deal with him, Mugbutt, okay?" Ker-donk! The stone landed in the cradle. Slam! Click! Strope Boltjaw kicked the door shut with his foot. He bent down and secured the latch. "Done it!" he roared triumphantly. Twig's heart fluttered. The wonderful pirate ship was skyworthy once more, and he whooped and cheered with the rest. "This shall not go unremembered, Stoop Boltjaw," Sligo announced. "Well done." "Yes," came a second voice, deep and sonorous. "Well done." Everyone spun around. "Captain!" Tim Barkwater grinned. "You made it." "Indeed I did, Tim," came the solemn reply. Twig gazed at the captain. He looked magnificent. He was tall and, unlike the stooping Sligo Spleeth, stood upright, proud and elegant. His side whiskers were waxed in, and a black leather patch stretched across one eye. Here's a picture. Looks like a pirate, huh? Okay. Across one eye. From his long pirate's coat hung a multitude of objects, from goggles, a telescope, to grappling irons and daggers. By his side was a long curved cutlass, which glinted in the silver moonlight. Twig started. Hadn't he seen such a cutlass before, with its jeweled handle and nick in the blade? Just then, an eighth figure emerged from the undergrowth. Twig stared. It was a Banderbear, though quite different from his old friend, for this one was white, with red eyes, an albino. It pulled its dead body of a hamel horn from its shoulder and let it fall to the ground. Then it took its place behind the captain. "Ah, Hubble," the captain said, "just who I wanted to see. Take the flathead and chain him up." The Banderbear pointed up to the skyship. "What?" it said. "No," said the captain, "to a tree, but a strong one, mind." Mugbutt snarled and raised a fist in defiance. The Banderbear swatted it away and seized the chain around the goblin's neck, almost lifting him off his feet. "Easy, Hubble," ordered the captain. There's the Banderbear. Aw, another Banderbear. "Do you think that is altogether wise, sire?" came the whining voice of Sligo Spleeth. "Here we are in the deep woods. Anything might be out there. Mugbutt could be useful in case of a surprise attack." The captain turned and fixed Sligo with his good eye. "Do you think I cannot read your mutinous heart, Spleeth?" he said. "Your friends in the Undertown League of Free Merchants are no use to you out here in the deep woods. We're an independent crew, and I give the orders. One more word and I'll have you sky-fired. Do I make myself clear?" "What's sky-fired?" Twig whispered to Spiker. "Tied to a branch of burning blood oak," the oak elf whispered back. "You go up like a rocket, screaming all the way." Twig shuddered. "We'll stay here the night and depart at first light," the captain was saying. He turned to Tim. Right then, ship's cook," he said, kicking at the dead hamel horn. "Get cooking." "Aye, aye, captain," said Tim keenly. "Spiker pilot us a route back to Undertown. I don't want to be stuck in these accursed woods any longer than necessary." He looked up. "How much longer will you need to effect repairs, Boltjaw?" "A couple hours, captain," came the reply. "I've just got to camphor the new bidgets and realign the rudder pins." "And the stone pilot?" "He's down in the engine room reboring the flange ducts." "Excellent work," said the captain. He turned and looked down at Twig, and it was at that moment that Twig knew for sure that he had met the captain before. It was the eye patch which had stopped him recognizing him at once. He was the one Tum-Tum and he had met all that time ago in the forest when his wood troll father had been trying to set him up with a job. The tall, elegant sky pirate with his jeweled sword, with the nick in its blade. How could he have forgotten? "Why are you just standing there gaping?" the captain barked. Help the others with the fire. Twig set to work at once. He dashed into the forest to collect kindling. When he returned, however, the fire was already blazing, roaring and crackling. With every log that Spiker and Tem Barkwater tossed into the fire, a mighty shower of orange sparks filled the air. The fire sang and groaned and hissed with the different woods. Occasionally, a piece of blazing luffwood floated up from the flames and soared off into the sky like an emergency flare. Twig shuddered. Growing up with the wood trolls, he had been taught to respect fire, the most treacherous necessity of all to the forest dweller. That was why they burnt buoyant woods in stoves. The sky pirate's carelessness appalled him. He was busy kicking burning branches back into the main blaze when Hubble returned from chaining Mugbutt securely to a tree. He was looking for the captain, yet as he passed Twig, it paused. "Whoa!" it bellowed, and pointed at the tooth around Twig's neck. "I wouldn't go too near Hubble if I was you," Tem Barkwater called. "It's an unpredictable beast at the best of times." But Twig took no notice. Despite the white Banderbear's ferocious appearance, there was a familiar sadness in its eyes. It stretched out a claw and gently touched the tooth. "Twug?" it growled. Twig stared back in amazement. Hubble knew who he was. He remembered the times his old friend had yodeled to the moonlit sky. He remembered the yodeled replies. Could it have been Hubble's desolate cry that Twig had heard the night the Banderbear had died? Hubble touched his chest and then pointed to Twig. "Friends," it said. Twig smiled. "Friends," he said. At that moment there came the sound of the captain's angry voice. He wanted Hubble, and he wanted him now. Hubble swung around and plodded off obediently. Twig looked up to see Tem Barkwater staring at him in disbelief. "I swear I have never seen the like in all my born days." Here he is talking to him. "Aw, they're friends. Friends. Friends with a Banderbear? Whatever next?" He shook his head. "Come on, young'un," he said. "Help me over here." Tem was standing by the fire, having expertly skinned the hamel horn. He had skewered it on a length of ironwood and placed it above the flames. The air was now thick with the smell of roasting meat. Twig joined him, and the pair of them turned the spit round and round, round and round. By the time that Stoop Boltjaw announced he had finished his repairs and came down from the tree, the hamel horn was cooked. Tem banged a gong. "Grub's up," he called. Twig sat down between Tem Barkwater and Spiker. The captain and Hubble were opposite them, with Slivo Spleeth sitting back a little in the shadows. The stone pilot hadn't appeared, and Mugbutt, the flathead goblin, still chained to a tree, had to make do with the scraps he was thrown. As the sky pirates filled their empty stomachs with black bread and steaming chunks of hamel horn meat washed down with mugfuls of wood ale, their spirits lifted. "Of course," laughed Tem Barkwater. "We've been in worse scrapes than this, ain't we, Captain?" The captain grunted. He didn't seem to feel like talking. "Why, that time we raided the League ships over Sanctifrax itself. Never thought we'd get away with it. Cornered we were. Now where to run? And a boarding party of wild flathead goblins with murder in their minds popping up out of the cargo holds of those big, fast League ships. Never seen Spleeth shake so much, nor run so fast neither. Kept saying, 'There should have been liver birch in the holds.' And so there should," muttered Slitho. "Would have made us all a packet, too. But the captain wasn't running. Oh, no, not him, not Cloud Wolf," Tem chuckled. "He just pulled out that great sword of his, and set about the lot of 'em, Hubble following behind. It was murder, all right, but not the kind those goblins had in mind. That's where we got Mugbutt. Only one left standing. Mighty good fighter, but needs watching. It's also where the captain lost his eye. Fair exchange, he calls it." "Enough, Tem," sighed the captain. "It weren't no fair exchange when I lost my jaw, broke in Stoop Boltjaw, his ironwood replacement squeaking as he spoke. Had my back turned, attending to the grappling socket. Ulbus Pentafraxus creeps up behind me with a hunting axe. I never stood a chance. He spat into the fire. He's now a league captain, living the life of luxury in Undertown. Leaguesman. Ugh. He hawked and spat again. Oh, they're not so bad, wheedled Slivo Spleeth, shifting closer to the fire. Now, when I was starting out in Undertown as... Spiker, the captain interrupted. Have you plotted that course? The oak elf nodded. Good lad, he said, and looked slowly around the circle of pirates, suddenly somber. The 3 rules of sky sailing. Never set sail before you've plotted your course. Never fly higher than your longest grappling rope. And on no account dock in uncharted areas. The pirates nodded earnestly. Each and every one of them knew the perils of getting lost in the vast green leafy ocean. The fire was low. Twig watched the flickering flames reflected in the captain's thoughtful eye. I did that once, he went on, landed where I should not have landed. He sighed, but then I had no choice. The pirates looked at one another in surprise. It was unlike the captain to speak of himself. They topped up their mugs and drew closer. The darkness wrapped itself around them. A wet and stormy night it was. Captain Quintinus Virginex Cloud Wolf began. Twig's body tingled with excitement. A cold night, he said. A night of expectation and sorrow. Twig hung on his every word. There he is, starting to tell his tale. At that time, I was a crew member on board a league ship. Oh my gosh, it's so long. He looked around the circle of faces bathed in the dying fire glow, mouths open, eyes wide, and smiled. You load of ruffians, he chuckled. If you think I'm a hard taskmaster, you should have served under Moltenius Gobtrax. Ruthless, demanding, punctilious. The worst sort of league captain you'll ever meet. Twig watched the fireflies playing roly-poly in the air and darting in and out of the leaves. The wind had dropped completely and his hair and skin felt damp. He chewed on the corner of his scarf. Picture it, the captain said. Twig closed his eyes. There were but 5 of us on board the ship, and only 4 who were in any state to sail her. Gobtrax and his bodyguard, the stone pilot, and me. Maris was already 9 months with child. The storm had caught us unawares and dragged us away off course. Worse than that, the up currents were terrible strong. Before we could weigh anchor or secure the grappling irons, we'd been sucked up far above the forest and towards the open sky. There they are. Uh-oh. Twig's head spun. Straying from the path was bad enough, but being lost in open sky. We lowered the sails, but still we continued to rise. I crouched down next to Maris. Everything's going to be all right, I said, though I scarce believed it myself. We would never get back to Undertown before she went into labor, and even if we did, the birth of the child was little cause for celebration. Twig opened his eyes and looked at the captain. He was staring into the glowing embers of the fire, playing idly with the wax points of his side whiskers. His single eye shone moistly. Was there something wrong with it? Asked Twig. The captain stirred. No, he said, only the fact that it was a child at all. He paused and his eye glazed over. Maris and I had big decisions to make, he said. I was ambitious. I intended one day to command my own skyship. I couldn't be doing with a child weighing me down, a captain or a father. That was the choice I had. It was no choice at all. I told Maris that we could travel together, but she would have to choose between the baby and me. She chose me. He breathed deeply in and out. Mother Horsefeather agreed to take the child off our hands. Complete silence fell around the campfire. The pirates looked down at the ground awkwardly. They felt uneasy listening to their cloud wolf opening up in this way, Tim Barkwater busied himself with stoking up the fire. The captain sighed. At least that was the plan. Yet, there we were, miles from under town and being drawn ever upwards. He nodded up to the sky ship. It was the stone pilot who saved us then, as he saved us this evening. He doused the buoyant wood burners, released the balance weights, and when that was not enough, he climbed over the side and began chipping away at the flight rock. Bit by bit, its slivers and shards broke off. Our ascent slowed. Then we stopped. Then we started to go down. By the time the hull of the ship touched down on the forest, there were 6 on board. Maris had given birth. The captain stood up and began pacing agitatedly back and forth. "What'd you do?" he said. "What to do?" he said. "We were grounded now in the deep woods, and the baby wouldn't survive the journey on foot back to Undertown. Gobtrax ordered us to get rid of the brat. He said he wouldn't wait." Maris was hysterical, but Gobtrax's bodyguard, a hulking great Cloddertrog, made it clear that he'd snap my neck if I objected. What could I do? The pirates shook their heads earnestly, solemnly. Tim poked the fire. We left the sky ship and set off into the forest. I remember how loud the creatures of the night were, and how still the tiny bundle in Maris's arms. Then we came across a small village of wood trolls. Twig started. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Icy shivers strummed his spine. Odd creatures, the captain mused. Stocky, dark, not that bright. They live in tree cabins. I had to tear the child away from Maris. The look in her eyes at that moment, it was as if all the life had drained out of her. She never spoke a word again. The captain sniffed. Twig's heart beat faster and faster. I wrapped the baby up in a shawl, he went on, his voice little more than a whisper. The birthing shawl that Maris had made for it. Stitched it all herself, she did. With a lullaby tree for luck, she said. I left the bundle at the foot of a cabin tree, and the pair of us left. We didn't once look back. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. The captain paused and stared ahead into the shadows of the forest, hands clasped behind his back. Despite the roaring flames, Twig was cold. He had to clamp his jaws firmly shut to still his chattering teeth. You made the right decision, Captain, said Tim Barkwater quietly. The captain turned. I made the only decision, Tim, he replied. It's in the blood. My father was a sky pirate captain, as was his father and his father before him. Perhaps. Twig's head was whirling, buzzing. Thought after thought collided with one another. The abandoned baby, the wood trolls, the scarf, his comforting cloth, still tightly tied around his neck. My scarf, he thought. He stared at the majestic sky pirate captain. Could you really be my father? He wondered. Does your blood flow through my veins? Will I also command a sky ship one day? Maybe, maybe not. There was something Twig had to know. The baby? He said nervously. The captain spun around and looked at him, actually seeing him, it seemed for the first time, his eyebrow above the patch raised questioningly. This is Twig, Captain, said Tim Barkwater. He found the flight rock and... I believe the lad can speak for himself, said the captain. What did you want to say? Twig climbed to his feet and looked down at the ground. His breath came short and jerky. He could barely speak. Sire, he said, was the baby a girl or a boy? Quintinius Virginix stared back at Twig, his brow deeply furrowed. Perhaps he could not remember. Perhaps he remembered only too well. He stroked his chin. It was a boy, he said finally. The sound of chains jangled behind him as Mugbutt rolled over in his sleep. The captain drained his mug and wiped his mouth. Early start tomorrow, he said. We could all do with some shut-eye. Twig thought he would never sleep again. His heart was a flutter. His imagination was working overtime. Hubble, You're on first watch, the captain said. Wake me at 4. Whoa, said the Banderbeer, grunted. And be careful of our treacherous friend here. Twig started with alarm until he realized the captain was referring to Slivo Spleeth. Here, said Spiker as he handed Twig a blanket. Take this. I'll be warm enough tonight in my catter nest. And with that, the oak elf climbed the tree, boarded the skyship, and made his way up to the cocoon at the top of the mast. Twig wrapped the blanket around him and lay down on a bed of quilted leaf fall. The fire was burning bright and hot. Glittering sparks and glowing embers rose skyward. Twig stared into the dancing flames. But for the sky pirate, this Captain Cloud Wolf, the one who had caused Spelda and Tuntum to send Twig away for fear he would be forced to join his crew, but for him, Twig would never have left the Wood Troll village in the first place. He would never have strayed from the path. He would never have been lost. But now he understood. He had always been lost, not just when he left the path, but from the very beginning, when the Sky Pirate had left him wrapped in the birthing shawl beneath the Snatchwood cabin. Now he'd been found again. 3 short sentences kept going around and around in his head. I found my path. I found my destiny. I found my father. Twig closed his eyes. The image of the heart-charming stick pointing upwards sprang into his mind. That was where his future lay, in the sky with his father. Dun, dun, dun. The next chapter is called The Glomglozer. Oh!